Moore grew up and went to college in California. His academic interests were math and science. He taught and did research in Latin America and the Boston area. He has always been interested in storytelling and is now a full-time writer who writes mysteries, thrillers, science fiction, novels, and short fiction. His latest book, Rembrandts Angel, has been called a riveting read with a flair for originality and mastery of the mystery technique. It allows readers to seem to have an armchair adventure and be detectives. So I am very pleased to welcome Stephen Moore. Thank you.
I want to thank Lucy for that excellent introduction. This talk is really about storytelling. Before I continue with that topic, though, I want to thank her and the Montclair Women's Club for having me today. Also Channel 34 for filming. This is an honor for me to be here today, and I hope we can get a deeper appreciation of what goes into storytelling. Why is storytelling important? Well, it really helps make us human. All the way back to prehistoric times, we had an oral tradition. Later on, in the Middle Ages, we had books, but until Gutenberg invented his press, books weren't available to everyone. After the invention of the press, books really took off. So books have since then carried the burden of telling stories to many, many, many people around the world. And my idea is that without readers and writers, we lose some of our humanity, and that is not a good thing to happen as we go into the future. As I said, books are important because of storytelling. When we go back to the Middle Ages, Irish monks saved a lot of classics from antiquities, copying them basically by hand. If any of you have been to Dublin and seen the Book of Kells, there is one example of that. And all the way to present day, various authors have also recognized the importance of books. Particular Ray Bradbury in Fahrenheit 451 showed how autocratic organizations can use the book burning of books to continue their policies. Recognizing, I think he probably got this idea by recognizing the importance of books for our own humanity. Books are important, so bookstores and libraries are important. And I, in some of my novels, have maybe committed the sin of having a cameo, let's call it a cameo, where I'm a bookseller, because somehow I've always wanted to be a bookseller and be in some dusty old book store and selling books to the public and talking to the public about books. Well, here I am today talking about books. In fact, there are several novels out there where the bookstore or a book depository is almost a main character of the book. One that comes to mind is a book which you may not have read. It's a book by Carlos Luis Zafrón. It's called, in the original Spanish, La Sombra del Viento. It's that would be translated to the Shadow of the Wind. And the book depository and bookstore there in that book is main character, and the setting is during the time of Franco in Spain, in Barcelona. So it's a very interesting book. When I was talking to Lucy about this talk, she said, well, why don't you tell your own story too? And she told part of that in her good introduction. I've, as you can see by my white beard, I've been around a bit, and I traveled and for work and pleasure. I've seen a lot of, well, I've actually lived in a foreign country and seen many cultures and people, how they interact and live in those cultures. I came to recognize the grand diversity we have on this planet, and the wonderful people that we have here. And in some of my science fiction, I paint this picture of astronauts and other people looking at the Earth from space, and I'm sure they're one of the first ones to recognize that we're on this spaceship together, going buzzing around the universe, and we should all just get along and be cognizant of other cultures and respect them. That is a theme that's in some of my books. How did I get started writing? Well, I developed an early love for the written word. When I was about 3 or so, with my mother's help, I learned the basics of reading and writing. I was interested in making my own comic books, but I needed something to put in those balloons. So you need words, and need to know what they mean to put them in the balloons. When I was 13, I think it was the summer I turned 13, I wrote my first novel. That went in the trash can when I went to college, because that's where all first novels should go. Yeah, I've always wanted to be a storyteller. Now, economics and life choices come into play there, and I also found science and technology intriguing, and so I decided that was a good way to make a living. But all my life I've collected ideas for stories and written sketches and things like that. It's a lifetime of collecting story ideas. And I'm afraid my muses that are really banshees with tasers, they tend to go after me because they know that, and they think I should get all these stories out of my system before the Grim Reaper comes for me, let's put it that way. So I do my best. Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time in academics in both the United States and abroad. And I also spent almost a quarter century up in the Boston area doing R&D. In science, my discipline was physics. I was pretty good at mathematics when I was a kid, so it was sort of a natural choice as being a little more practical in mathematics, but had a lot of mathematics in it. But like I said, I always wanted to be a storyteller. So now I'm a full-time writer of mysteries, thrillers, and sci-fi. Sometimes I combine those genres. I will not so recently, I will come out with a second edition of a book called The Secret Lab, which is a young adult novel, which is also a sci-fi mystery. So it combines the two genres. My first book was Full Medical. I published that in 2006. Excuse me. My last book was Rembrandts Angel. That was published by Penmore Press last year in May. As I said, we lived in the Boston area for many, many years. We came to Montclair about, I guess 7, almost 8 years now ago, and I was immediately impressed by wonderful cultural diversity here in this town, and of course the proximity to New York City and all that made it a very interesting place for us to spend our time. So that's my own story. What about my favorite authors? You know, an author doesn't write in a vacuum. He reads. I think most authors read. I was always an avid reader, probably more an avid reader than a writer, even though I do have quite a few books. I've always loved to read. So many authors and genres have influenced me with all those books I've read over the years. Someone asked me when I was talking to people before that I think it was Lucy, whether I collected books. Yes, I have bookshelves that are sagging, and a lot of those I've read. Many more books than science tomes. So that's something that I've pretty much carried with me on every move. But going back to my childhood, I have some childhood favorites that I'd like to mention here. The first is Isaac Asimov. You've probably heard of him, probably for his sci-fi and popular science books. A lot of people don't know he was also a fan of mysteries. And two of his rather famous science fiction books are also mysteries. Actually, they're police procedurals, set in the future, of course, but they're police procedurals. So he was one of my first authors that I'd like to mention. Mostly sci-fi. We have to ask also, well, how did I get into thrillers? Well, it used to be that thrillers were called adventure stories. And I got hooked on adventure stories. You've probably heard of this author, H. Rider Haggard. He had the She series, Ayesha, the almost god woman that played a part in a long series that he had, and he also wrote the Alan Quatermain series. He intrigued me as a child, and still does, in fact. And I try to make the thriller part of my books very much adventures. In fact, a new book I'll be coming out with is subtitled The Adventures of Penny Castro, for that reason, even though the title is different. I'll mention that a little bit later. If you look at Rembrandts Angel, you'll see that I've dedicated it to Agatha Christie. She was also one of my favorites as a child. When I say child, I'm talking about junior high school. I probably read almost all the mysteries and adventures and sci-fi in our public library. By the time I finished what's called junior high in California, where I grew up, it's called middle school here. And that's what I mean by childhood authors that I like. Agatha Christie and, of course, her two wonderful characters, Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot, are favorites of mine and still are. So I dedicated Rembrandts Angel to them. I've met a lot of interesting people in my life. I'd like to mention two of them. I went to, my first college was UC Santa Barbara. I'm a native Californian. And my UCSB English teacher, N. Scott Momaday, was a Native American author, N. Scott Momaday. After I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, he received the Pulitzer Prize for The Housemaid of Dawn. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. It's very good. It's set in, I think, New Mexico. It's a very interesting story. Another interesting person, which came from my scientific experiences, was Abdul Salam. He's a Pakistani Nobel Prize winner in physics, I should say was. He passed away a few years back. We organized an Einstein Centennial Symposium where I was teaching and doing research in Bogota, Colombia. That was 1979. He came and graced us with his presence there, and talking with him was quite an experience. He's the founder of the International Center for Theoretical Physics in Trieste, Italy. In 1982, I spent a good time there and appreciated all the, let's say, physics culture that went on in that center, physics, mathematics, and other technical things. This center is dedicated to scientists and engineers, technologists in the third world. He wants people to come there, take their courses, participate in the research groups, and go back to their third world countries and lift their own countries up there by their bootstraps. So he was quite an interesting person. How do you come to be a writer? Well, you have to have lots of story ideas. Because the bottom line is there are two steps. There's writing, there's publishing. The writer has to write the best story she or he can. That means, like I've done, you have to collect lots of ideas over time, what ifs, plot ideas, character sketches, setting sketches, even snippets of dialogue. You can jot those down in a napkin in when you go for your coffee, at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. My wife will attest that I often did that. I don't see her here. She's definitely one of my inspirations, and has been very patient with me, sitting there while jotting down things on napkins while she goes window shopping. A lot of this was done in Lexington, Massachusetts, which has a nice little downtown like Upper Montclair, but it has some of the features of the rest of Montclair, and good places to eat and all that, ethnic food. So I would sit in the coffee shop and jot down ideas while she went up and down the sidewalk there, window shopping, and come back for me later on. So that's how you get ideas for a book. People think, well, I don't have a book in me. Well, you might have that. If you have ideas in today's publishing market, a lot of people have the freedom now to put their ideas out there and write their own stories. And I think the more we do that, as I said, the more it makes us human. Once you get your story done, of course, you have to publish it. And that requires, a lot of people don't realize today everybody says you can publish a book. Well, you shouldn't be doing things that professionals can do better. I'm talking about editing, both content and copy editing. I'm talking about proofreading, formatting, cover art, even PR and marketing. There are professionals that will help you do that. You almost are faced to do that nowadays, especially because the publishers, if you publish your book with a publisher, they publish so many books that they expect the author to contribute a lot after he writes the book. But I think that's all doable if you go to the right people and do it. All right. An example, Rembrandts Angel. I'm going to give you a couple of what-ifs that I considered when I began this book. The characters were pretty well defined. The main characters are Esther Brookstone, an inspector, Scotland Yard inspector. She works in the Art and Antiquities Division of Scotland Yard, which is a real division. Many of you might know that Scotland Yard is really the Metropolitan Police. It's a London organization. It's not MI5 or MI6. It's a London organization. It's the Metropolitan Police. Well, she's a cop, but working in that division, the Art and Antiquities Division, she is very much concerned with recovering artworks and capturing art thieves. And she becomes obsessed with this painting by Rembrandt, An Angel with Titus's Features. Now, who was Titus? Titus was Rembrandt's son. And he used Titus, and you people here all know Jenna Susie, I'm sure. She came up with many paintings where Rembrandt used his son as a model for angels. And, what better model for an angel than a father-son, right? But this particular painting, An Angel with Titus's Features, was stolen by the Nazis in World War II. It's never been recovered. It's one of 200 paintings that were stolen. I think only about 100 of them have been recovered. And Rembrandt's Angel, the title painting of the book, The Angel with Titus's Features, was never recovered. And so Esther Brookstone thinks she has a chance of recovering that when she receives, through a friend of hers who lives in the English countryside, a letter calling for attendance at an auction where they're going to auction off this painting. Well, the people who are auctioning this off are not particularly good types. So she gets the help of, let's call him a boyfriend, right? He's an Interpol agent, Bastiaan van Koeverden. Where did I get that name? Where do I get my names? It turns out I was looking for he's Dutch, so I was looking for a Dutch name. I was intrigued by the fact that Van Koeverden, the last name Van Koeverden, is where Vancouver got its name. And I said, well, okay, let me just use that in my book, because it's a mouthful, but Bastiaan is Dutch, and so why not use that name? Anyway, she gets his help, and the two go traipsing around Europe and the world a bit, and I'll leave it to you to find out when you read the book whether she finds the painting or not. But that is the basic story. So the one what if is, I probably should have said this first. What if Agatha Christie had Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot work together in a novel? She never did. So when I was a kid, I said, wait a minute, wouldn't it be great to put these together in a novel? Well, I couldn't do that because Agatha Christie has an estate, right? So I created two characters that sort of met their description, Esther Brookstone and Bastiaan van Koeverden. And I also dedicated the book to Agatha Christie. So there were a few other what-ifs that entered into that. One, I think I've probably already mentioned, maybe not, maybe just discussing with people here. What if two characters keep nagging me for me to tell their story? That often happens to me. It sounds a little bit schizophrenic, but it often happens that you get so involved with your characters, they seem to come alive. They take on their own identity, and then they sort of start pounding on your mind to say, well, we need our own story. That's happened with me in several books, and I guess it's just part of the creative experience. I haven't heard other authors talk about this, but I'm talking about it to you, so you can sort of ask that around to other authors you might know and see how often that is, or maybe I'm just nuts. But anyway, the two characters were nagging me to tell their own story, and I had all these other old ideas circulating around, and everything just sort of came together in this book. Now, I have other projects. In fact, I have 5 going on right now in various states of along the road of getting published. I'll mention 2 of them. I have a post-apocalyptic thriller. That's a type of sci-fi where bad things happen, and that's the apocalypse, and then people have to survive after that happens. That's been accepted for publication just this week, actually. And I think I already mentioned The Secret Lab. And there will be another one in that young adult series called The Secret of the Urns. They'll come out the first and third quarter of this year. And then the other projects, well, maybe this year or 2019. We'll see how it goes. That's sort of my talk. Again, I want to thank everybody here. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. And thank you for your attention.